Hello and welcome to BOT. Nidal, Lakshit, Suman, and Manthan meet here to talk about the bits of tech as it relates to digital transformation. Tune in and enjoy.
All right, hello everyone. We are back again, this time with the perspective of storytelling using data visualization tools, which is one of the hot favorite topics on this panel, at least as I know from past experience. You will have been extensively using data visualization tools. I have not, very little experience into it because of very little patience. As I was trying to say, patience is the first quality that is needed for data visualization because funnily enough, when I started data visualization things, between two monitors the colors look different and if like the same color looks different in two monitors, and that could very well lead to the brand for which you are, let's say, building a dashboard, coming back and saying that, hey, this is not our theme color. So how do you ensure that that color is right? You put the color code no matter what monitor you are using, right? These little nuances are only found out after you start using data visualization tools enough such that your basics are in place, such that you understand that it is much beyond dashboarding, uh, such that you're able to connect the dots to finding out the facts on how what you're building is going to get consumed and what is the end objective of it, right? Because it takes, I don't know, n hours, let's say 10 hours to build a dashboard, but it takes 5 minutes for somebody to view that dashboard and make a decision. It should ideally take 5 minutes. That's the idea. So um, the more effort you put into it, the better the story. One thing that I can say is that I'm kind of anti data visualization, not because I don't want to do it, not because I don't like it, but for the fact that it takes way too much effort than it should. Ideally, data visualization, in my opinion, should be an output of everything that we do. That means you could be writing a program, and the output of that should be in a data visualization format by default, or you could be writing a query, or you could be, dragging and dropping into Excels, right? And aggregating some data, and that all of it, in my opinion, should be automated to a level where your Power BI or Tableau dashboards are ready from there. That's my initial thoughts on, how data visualization should be, and what it is like, or how I have consumed it, or how I've seen it from an anti-data visualization lens, wherein for me that is plain effort. But I'll see what others have to say.
I'd like to disagree to that very politely. From a sense of, does that make our lives more difficult or easier? The kind of thought I got from what you said was, it sort of makes our life difficult, but that's not the point, right? Um, if the way to get output from data visualization makes our lives more difficult, that's probably not the way to do it, right? And one thing I want to say here is um, the advent of no code or low code data visualization softwares have made things much easier. Now, I agree with you on one aspect, Manthan, that if historically or traditionally how data visualization was done, or using a lot of queries, if you had to spend 80% of the time cleaning up the data in order to even make it fit for visualization, yes, you're talking about some real life problems there. But assuming, okay, it's just an assumption, it doesn't exist in the real world. Assuming that your data is ready to load, you have plenty of platforms these days that make it slightly easier to visualize data and make it available at your fingertips, even for somebody who does not have a lot of coding or technical background. I think that's one of the shifts in terms of um, having data available at the fingertips, and making it easy for anybody sitting in any business function to start visualizing data. That's just a different take, just my honest opinion. But I think we have a couple of areas where definitely we need to make some improvements to make that happen.
No, of
Uh,
course, like what you're saying makes sense, Nidal. My point of view was that the process is tedious, right? Of course, it is needed. Of course, there are huge decisions being taken out of it. but the process is so bloody tedious to a guy like me. And once you figured it out, once it is streamlined, you know that yes, if you put an Excel sheet on an FTP, your data visualization tools today are so smart that they'll pick it up from that FTP and then post it on a dashboard in the predefined format, right? That is there, given, like, good advancement. What my hope was that data visualization shouldn't be a thing. It should be a very obviously integrated component into the businesses that is today, or at least that's where I see it going. With the process being so tedious today, but we'll dwell into it more. Lakshit, you were trying to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to start by, quoting one of the management legends, Peter Drucker, who said that what gets measured gets improved. And that is the entire idea and the objective behind data visualization, in my opinion. The idea behind data visualization is not just about making fancy numbers, charts, and such. It's about giving in business or the business stakeholders the right kind of information to make impactful decisions. So the decision making must be backed by the data points that they have. Uh, for example, how did we do last year? How did we perform compared to last month, last quarter? Coming up, we have a festive season coming up. What are the expected sales during those seasons? How do we need to improve our resources? Do we need to increase our inventories, resources, manpower to tackle the demand that's coming in? Or is the seasonal effect going to be a shortage in supply? Just to anticipate those demand and supply questions for the business is where data visualization is extremely critical and important to drive those critical business metrics. Every business has their own critical metrics. Manufacturing would have something like inventory, manpower, the stocks available, the limited stock, the throughput rate. Whereas another business like a supply chain business would actually be more interested in these throughput rates, the number of vehicles available, the stocks, the full truckloads or the partial truckload estimates, how many trucks are going from point A to B. Somebody like an IT company would be more interested in this. A SaaS company would be more interested in metrics like ARRs, annual recurring revenues, or the number of subscriptions and user acquisition. So these are some of the key metrics that there are that drive the business decisions, which is where I feel data visualization is extremely critical. Of course, that's the top line. Like that's where the consumption starts. And as we drill down from business stakeholders to say somebody at line manager level to execution level and departmental level, then that's where the matrices either get to start to trickle down, or you could say that they all start to aggregate upwards. So data visualization, that's where it becomes critical, and the data processing, analysis, storage framework, or the storage and analysis framework becomes more critical. Visualization is merely just a means to the end of telling the story that the underlying data already has in place. I'll pass it over to Suman for her experiences.
All right, all right. I think none of us should be working in the data world if we're not ready to get our hands dirty, quite frankly. So, irrespective of where we were earlier and where we are heading to, obviously, there's so many API connectors. You can integrate systems very easily compared to what it was probably 5 or 10 years ago. So, I think that's not a problem, right? Absolutely not. So, in my perspective, with reference to data visualization, why that is important is because there is a story to tell. There's a story to communicate. Now, if a VP of a company if he has to go through n number of mails or n number of documents in order to make a decision, you're actually, he's actually wasting his time. So generally, that's what we see, especially in the supply chain space, right? Let's say a VP of demand planning team in any company, they spend almost 4 to 5 hours just trying to understand, what should be the next actionable insight, or probably what they should be doing. Now, when you have data visualization, you have and you're able to, let's say, you're integrating it into a chatbot so that a VP can just type, hey, what is it that I should be looking into, or anything of that sort, right? Whatever KPI that he's looking at, and he has the answer. So what's important is the story that is important for each persona. B, what are the recommendations and actionable insights for those personas? And that will vary according to their line of business, the work that they do, but it definitely reduces the time in terms of, you know, trying to find out what to do, especially in the supply chain space, because those people are not that data savvy. So you cannot expect them to, let's say, write queries in order to, know, is there a malfunction or anything that's going to be hit and that they need to take care of. So I think it's a very important thing, and it's not just limited to Tableau or Power BI or any other visualization tool that we have in the market today. I can give a very interesting example of basin networks. So it's basically there's something called as causal modeling. So it is beyond your correlations actually, and causal modeling, one of the ways of doing causal modeling is through Bayesian network, which is Bayes theorem. So what you're actually doing is using a conditional probability and trying to find out that, if an event A is going to occur, what is the probability? So one way to present this is in tables, and you go crazy looking at it. But when you present it in a network, that is very impactful. You're not doing it just so that, it's visually appealing to a stakeholder. Nobody cares, right? It is important because there he sees, okay, this is where my problem is going to lie. Let's say um, there is a stock in a particular location, and they don't really have that kind of demand. But in location B, there is a lot of demand. But in location B, let's say for some reason there's going to be a port congestion or any reason due to which the products cannot be shipped externally. And that is the thing that he can see through that network. So what I'm trying to say is that networks, the type of networks can be different, but and the use case that we're solving can differ. But these are very important things. It's not just something that we're trying to do for visual appeal. And I think it's a very interesting thing, definitely.
Yeah, I love your point about do visualization not just for the point of doing it, but for making things easier, right? That should be the end goal, right? I think Manthan, when you started off, you mentioned doing the thought or the process of doing it sort of makes it tedious. But if that makes the end goal really worth it, then that's the sort of decision or convincing factor for more people to believe in data visualization and to rely on it for the for achieving the means or as a means to the end maybe. The reason I say this is because it's easy for especially folks starting out in the data analytics career to typically there's a lot of roles where data visualization is the starting point for someone who joins as a data analyst, right? And there mostly what happens is you do data visualization because you're told to do it. And are you actually meeting the end goals? Probably not with your first couple of dashboards. You start getting client feedback, you start getting some questions, and then that's through multiple iterations that where you reach the better state where they get exactly what they need, and people actually rely on that dashboard. Now, I think data visualization really works if it makes reading data any more easier, if it very clearly outlines these are the items that need your attention without having a side-by-side manual which has like 7 to 8 instructions on how to use this dashboard. That is optional, but you don't need that. If a dashboard can work without having a manual beside it, if it's already or I think data visualization can be something as simple as a summarized email with some snippets, with some conditional formatting, very basic stuff, right? In Excel, conditional formatting is powerful. I've been using it a lot. Fun story. My dad got overwhelmed trying to buy a car. He had so many options. He reached out and he asked me, can you go through the best markets, the best cars available in the market, and do some comparisons and let me know. What I put together is just an Excel sheet which had data from different automobile company websites, and I also put some visual representations. I put like the front image. I still have that Excel sheet somewhere. Maybe I should share it with you guys. It had the image of the cars. It had some conditional formatting for the factors that mattered to him, which is like mileage versus price versus some other factors. And I just put it in a sheet and then highlighted some cells and then showed it to him. I also highlighted one of the options which was a good variant in terms of the price point, in terms of the mileage, in terms of the looks and everything. And I just highlighted it in green and sent it to him. And guess what? That's the model he bought, right? Now that was his decision, but did I manipulate his decision? Go for this item. You can do that with data. Now, if you are doing some analysis and if you are highlighting data using some really valid justifications, then that's the way to go, by highlighting based on some solid justification, not to try to create a bias, but also highlight what is the reason why you called out one of the options as a better option, right? And that's what really makes your story. If someone asks a question of why, then you have an answer.
That's an interesting take, Nidha.
Go on, Lakshit.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's really an interesting take because, you started with the Excel example, and I was just about to actually say that about the evolution of BI, frankly. I think most of us have started with Excel, Google Sheets, or those kind of, spreadsheets methods, where we did a lot of data analysis, do a lot of color formatting, charts, show the numbers, show the charts, create them, create those visualizations within Excel itself, and then show it to our stakeholders or to decision makers. But yeah, that's the interesting part about data visualization, like how it has evolved from something as basic as Excel to spreadsheet to more sophisticated BI tools like Power BI, Tableau, and such, and is now even getting into a more advanced space where we are able to now extract more predictive capabilities out of these BI tools. And as someone already mentioned, we are now even going beyond just business decision making, but also getting into a space of consumer experience, where consumers are directly being fed certain data and data points as marketing tactics. So the consumers at times even being sent for informational purposes and educational purposes, like how a CDC would use the data, to inform about any prevailing diseases in certain areas. Just interesting the evolution of BI from where it was back in the 90s to where it has come now to more sophisticated tools and where it will go further. But before we jump into that, I'd like to invite Manthan for his views. Sorry to cut you off, buddy. Feel free to take it over.
No, you're good. What I was trying to say is there are so many aspects to it, right? Where if I cumulatively take the four of us, right, and our experiences, we have mostly seen BI and data visualization from a lens of somebody who's in the industry, right? So from a lens of analyst, so to speak. So you know that either the analyst that you're working with or that you're the analyst who's building that dashboard, and there is a business stakeholder, for example, a VP who's making a decision. This is the general journey through which most BI visualization tools are seen. But I think the concept of BI visualization is yet to inflate or take its best shape, such that the backend systems are fully talking to the whatever it is, right? It could be a line of code, few lines of code that we've written to build a beautiful dashboard. That in itself is a BI visualization system, if not a tool, right? But the integration matters in terms of how nicely it gets integrated with your backend system. Backend system could be a CDP, for example, right? Am I able to fully visualize, take any CDP today, right? Or take any analytics system today? Am I able to fully visualize all data at once, right? At the click of a button? No. I still have to put in a lot of brains, which is basically I'm writing SQL queries, but using a mouse, right? I'm not writing the code, I'm just dragging and dropping it. To that end, the other example is your airport terminals, right? Uh, that is still a table. That is still a laundry list of all the flights that are either on time or delayed, or whatever columns are there with it, right? The international airports have this huge terminals, and the domestic airports have smaller ones, right? But they are using a tabular format. I think the application is there in actual systems like those, where if in real time, I don't have to wait 5 minutes looking at my screen, such that when my time will come in that order, when the screen refreshes every few minutes, uh, that for 5 minutes I'm staring at screen, and then my flight is at, like, the 12th hour mark, so I have to wait that much for that order to occur, right? uh, that in itself is a very simple example of where BI applications are bigger and beyond than our world, so to speak, right? And that these experiences are kind of lagging behind in the order of priority that different industries have. For example, an airline company, um, if an older integrated system is working good enough for them, right? Why would they go on about changing it to a system which will only better the customer experience by by some notch, right? Maybe it is controlled by the airport authority, for all you know. So to change these traditional systems in itself is a challenge, and that is where I think that we are lagging behind in terms of taking the data visualization bandwagon ahead. Uh, Such that the world gets changed with it, right? That's where I see technology going. Be it Gen AI that we spoke about the last, or maybe data privacy, or whatever it was. We're basically trying to change the world with it or make it better. I think the data visualization world is siloed in such a way that the larger experiences are not being touched upon yet, or at least not fully.
So, in my understanding, I feel that the data visualization field is growing enormously, and it's not as backward as we're thinking it to be. There are literally teams in a company, in an analytic firm, which are just data visualization teams. So I'm sure that they are doing something over there to ensure that there are, like, separate teams for data visualization. So let me just give you all two interesting examples, okay? One, the first use case is on spend visibility. Any company who sells a product would have a procurement division. Okay. What does a procurement division do? A number of things, out of which it is important for them to analyze how they're spending money, right? There are some sort of direct spend, and then there are indirect spends. Okay. Let's just consider these two categories. Now, my team, like internally in my company, we were working for a large CPG based firm based out of the US. And it was a pure data visualization work that we had done for them. And why is it important? A, we analyzed their spend across different categories. That's the first thing, obviously, that we can think of, right? B, we went up to probably, we considered 7 to 10 different dimensions that they were not looking at. It was obviously, it's always a collaborative effort. So I'm not just saying that the client would have missed on their part. It's just that sometimes you outsource work, right? Because of time crunch or whatever, XYZ reasons. So we found 7 to 10 dimensions which were very important. And at the end of the project, what we provided was around 6% of increase in spend visibility. So do you understand that number 6% might sound very, I mean, very small right now, but trust me, for for a company who is spending millions of dollars, if they're able to save a couple of, probably, I don't know, 500K or million, by gaining that 6% of visibility, it's a huge margin that we're working with. And this is one of the impact of data visualization that I'm talking about. You're saving dollars for the company. Obviously, that project was not about saving money for the company, but about providing that visibility. But what was the end goal? the company was saving money at the end of the day. That's where they were heading at through the work that was done. So this is the power of data visualization, wherein we are helping companies, in this reference. My second use case would be, again, for a large CPG company based out of US. And my team was working on a inventory management work. Actually, it wasn't my team, it was my colleagues, but I knew quite a lot of details because we were collaborating on something else. What she was doing was she started off with catering to only two stakeholders. The project was about anomaly detection in the inventory management space. Now, companies typically bear a lot of cost, probably billions of dollars in managing inventory, right? It's a huge problem. Now, what she was particularly trying to do was anomaly detection, wherein, let's say that if there was high fill rate or low fill rate, there would be alerts being sent to the right stakeholders and they would take action. Typically, it takes almost 7 to 8 hours to come to that conclusion. But because she had automated everything and that it was available on a visualization format, in a visualization format, as well as an email alert reminders that were being sent to the stakeholders, it has saved the company a lot in terms of managing and in terms of taking actions. You know, um, the fun part here and the interesting part here is starting off with just two stakeholders today. In that company, there are 400 stakeholders utilizing that platform. So, do you see the growth here? Obviously, we are doing something constructive with data visualization that the number of users have increased from the client side, and she's managing it wonderfully. It is a lot to do, quite frankly, because you're working with probably 10,000s of tables at one go and trying to figure things out. But I think that's the whole point of being in the data world. If you're not ready to invest your time and energy into things, then I think you will not get that output. Even if things are completely streamlined and automated, at the end of the day, what are you providing, or how are you adding value to your clients is important, to your stakeholders. And this is how I think this was a second use case that I can tell you uh, is definitely being done at a large scale.
Yeah, I think that's a great use case for, it's one of the reasons why data visualization continues to advance. People have found the value in it, right? There's the other end of the spectrum where you will find that, okay, there are 10 to 15 dashboards that were created for a client. Couple of them stopped working for probably 6 months or more, and nobody noticed, right? And that happens too. There are cases where dashboards are built, but nobody's using them. There's the problem of data adoption or the dashboard adoption, right? We have had clients, during my agency life, clients reach out raising this as the concern. This is the problem that we want to fix. We want to make our teams more data driven. We do have dashboards. We have spent a lot in Tableau licenses and whatnot, and in all the data stack or the technology stack investments. But it's not giving us the ROI because the teams are not simply not using it, right? So it's also a sort of a cultural thing, and it also depends on how well you've tried to answer your questions using those dashboards, and the team has to see the value in it, right? Now, I would compare data visualization or data dashboards in general to my pair of glasses right here, right? And the reason being that without these glasses, I can't see well, right? I can still see the laptop screen, but if someone walks up to the door and opens the door, I wouldn't be able to tell who it is exactly. Now, the reason why I compare it is because if you don't have data visualizations, if you don't have a bird's eye view at your fingertips of how things are looking like, are there any red marks? You are literally blind. You might be able to look at, you'll find the anomaly only if you're looking for it. The anomaly won't present itself to you. Now, That's why, just like I need these pair of glasses, if I'm managing maybe a thousands or $1 million business, I definitely need data visualization at my fingertips, because I need to know what goes wrong the moment it goes wrong. Especially these days, one of the other sort of trends in data visualization is also real-time data reporting, which has been there since a while. Some of us have worked together with clients who, if their dashboards break, they literally just call you on Skype or ask you to fix it immediately, because it's like they haven't had a specific meal at a time of the day, right? They rely on it that much, and that's because they can't make decisions without that dashboard functioning. And a couple of reasons why is because they believe in that data, right? And it's not built overnight. The trust in that data and that visual is built over time. And once they have started seeing results, when they have started taking decisions based off of it, right? So I think visualizations are just like these pairs of glasses, where it enables you to take decisions, and that's how it should be in an ideal world. Though it doesn't happen overnight. There's a lot of effort that goes into it, which goes back to what you were saying, Manthan, the effort, and sometimes it can be so much, especially for organizations that aren't prepared or in a position to just go and implement a dashboard.
So let me put it this way, right? And by the way, valid points. Of course, it is needed. Without glasses, you cannot do anything. Data visualization equals to glasses taken. That's there. There is a component of data analysis which can be done with or without data visualization tools, right? It is easier done with data visualization tools in certain organizational and or technological setup. In certain cases, it may not be needed, right? I can basically, and why I keep always going back to the tech is because in my past roles, I've written codes and or programs which would trigger on a certain condition, right? On a certain condition based on reading the data. Now, if I were to write 1,000 triggers like that, then I would write what is called as a stored procedure, right? Or a recursive program, which in itself will have the ability to go crawl the tables that I've spoken about and report these anomalies back to me, and then I could do an email. But of course, there is forward integration to it, and now there are BI tools which can do all of that for you, so that you don't need somebody technical per se to go in and do that, right? So the data analysis component is given more preference, as opposed to the fact that somebody needs to know, let's say, how to write queries or how to write a code to be able to do data analysis. That is a good star added in the data analysis world, right? In the data visualization world. But then when it comes to nuances of, okay, now that I'm writing queries using my mouse, which is basically drag and drop, and the intelligence system in the backend is doing things, what are the components? Is a bar graph better, or is a pie chart better, or is a line chart better? Those things become subjective in nature, right? And that's where I want to take some bit of a segue in knowing you all's experiences of, the method in which you choose components of data visualization. Bar graphs will never be outdated. Those are highly overrated, but that is the simplest explanation to anything that is happening, right? You create a line graph, yeah, that is good. You create interactive graphs, right? Like with the advancement that has happened, now there are interactive graphs where if I hover over it or if I click into it, I get further details. There are sub graphs that open and all of that. But how have you kind of learn to choose components, right? Or how would you go about it? If you have had experiences, I'd love to know those. So components become very important, and those come out of experience. There is no tool, in my understanding, or there is no book which would say that, yeah, if you want to represent the probability between two things, please present it on a pie chart or a bar graph, right? There is no right answer. One has to take a very subjective, educated, experienced call to be able to choose that component, in my understanding. So it is not done by the book. Eventually, as Nidal was saying, when the adoption grows, or that dashboard is utilized by enough people, that people are used to seeing that data in a certain graph. So you're basically training your stakeholders to see that graph enough number of times such that they understand it without even reading insights about it, right? But I still think that there are a lot of things that can be done as far as components of data visualization is concerned. And with that, I'd like to know what you'll think.
Sure. Thanks for that, Manthan. Just a thought out there. There are actually some best practices that we follow when we are creating these BI dashboards and visualizations. But before that, I just wanted to highlight something. When we talked, both you and Nidal talked about data analysis and dashboards. I just want to highlight a point there. Data analysis, in most cases, is supposed to be an ad hoc analysis. A, a stakeholder comes to you, asks, "Hey, what were my sales last year? Could you give me a proportion of how some of our categories performed last month?" Most of them, while can be done even using a BI tool, if you have a sophisticated BI tool, generally requires an analyst, point of view for validation purposes. Now it's really up to the analyst whether they go about choosing that report from a BI tool or create the node using SQL or any coding or Excel based platforms. So generally speaking, data analysis is supposed to be an ad hoc thing. Whereas when we talk about BI dashboards, we generally try and aim for standardization or templatized approach. What is exactly what you're saying? Like one of the reasons for adoption, education is so that if things become templatized or standardized, it can be easily consumed by everybody in the organization, or at least the relevant stakeholders in the organization. The relevant being the keyword. Uh, so in my experience, I used to be, when I used to create these sort of data analysis, these kind of reports, these kinds of dashboards, I would always start with asking the customers about the business objectives. Like, what is the reason would you like to create this dashboard for? Does it really aim at a bigger, larger picture? And actually document those questions in three to five key questions. Like, of course, you can have multiple drill downs to these questions. So, for example, what's your business priority? What would you like to see in this dashboard? What is the end decision that you want to take if you have this dashboard? What are some of the key matrices that you want to see in this dashboard? How and what is my responsibility? You tell me, what do you want to see? How do you want to see it? I'll figure that out. Once I have documented these business, like key business questions, the business decisions they want to make, I break down these questions uh, into sort of answerable, quantifiably. How do you quantifiably answer these questions? So, for example, if the business says that one of my key metrics is I want to see my business growth, the ARR, the annual recurring revenue, then this is one of the simplest way to answer is using a cell chart. You literally just put the ARR, last year ARR or last month ARR, year on year ARR, ARR this month into a single cell chart that says the number. Say 1 million ARR since last year, projected to go to maybe 5% left, 5 plus minus 5% from last year, something like that. So you use cell charts when you want to inform key businesses, and you try and keep them on the top of the dashboard so that you inform the key business decisions. So for key business decisions, as we already talked about, can depend from business to business. Insurance, banking will have a different metric. Gaming, let's say, as an industry, would have a different metric. Supply chain would have a different. Healthcare would have a very different metric. So all the key business metrics ideally should be on the top with very clear number quantifiable integration, indicators. Similarly, the way I then approach it is try and create a wireframe first. So even before I choose which BI platform to choose, what to choose, where to create the data, where to create my dashboard, I create a wireframe out of it. The wireframe could be done on multiple tools. You can use Paint, whichever you're comfortable. You can use Paint, you can use Canva, you can use PowerPoint presentation. Ensure that you create a dashboard, a visualization before to show your stakeholders, get their approval, get their feedback more than approval on how would they visualize it, seek their performance, seek their advice, get a mutual consent that these are the charts that I'm going to use. This is the order. This is the storytelling that I'm going to follow. So the story or the narrative of the dashboard is just as critical as the dashboard itself. It has to follow an order. Like I said, key business decisions, followed by some executionable numbers, followed by some recommendations, if we can. Uh, Follow that process. Show the wireframe to your, before you even create a dashboard on an actual platform, show the wireframe to the stakeholders, get their feedback, and then work with your backend developers to get the right data set in order on a chart to chart basis. Ideally, the best practice that I would follow, suppose you have, let's say, 5 charts in your dashboard. uh, there are two approaches to it. One, you can create a single very large table from which you pull in data for each chart. So you basically also document all the dimensions and the matrices that you intend to use in your dashboard. Document those dimensions in matrices. This will make your life easier when you're creating the backend tables, creating the dashboard. The two approaches, like I said, either create a one very large table for the entire dashboard and keep pulling data from individual columns in a query basis to create those charts. Or one of the approach that I feel is better is if you have decided on a framework, if you have decided on a wireframe, you know what chart you're going to use. The single digits can always come from any of the table. That's a single table that you can create. But generally speaking, I would always prefer creating individual tables for individual charts. The key matrices that we put on the top can be a part of single table where we pull in the data. The way it is easier is if there are any failures on the dashboard, it's very easy to troubleshoot them. So you know which data failed, because a lot of the times these data sources come from multiple tables. So it's easier to troubleshoot, it's easier to point where the data failed. Uh, if any of the charts fail due to any front end reasons, at least the other ones continue to remain operational. And also the dashboard becomes much lighter from the backend perspective, easier to load, easier to refresh. And as a backend table, because the backend tables become more leaner, it's easier to document them, which is very important for a backend developer. Assuming if somebody has to change their job or they move out of the organization, it's easier for knowledge transfer to the other person. You're keeping a single table makes it very, very difficult to understand the relations, the metadata that's involved in creating the dashboard. So there are a lot of best practices involved. Uh, yeah, and the charts. I'll let Nidal pitch in for the the diagram is the diagrammatics and the component decisions. But yeah, happy to wander over the best practices involved regarding the pie charts and bar charts as well. Over to you, Nidal.
Yeah, I've filled in the shoes of that person trying to figure out, where that table went wrong. The guy left the company. We don't have his contact number nor his email address. Been in that situation before, and it's not an easy one, especially when it's not well documented. When best practices are not followed right. I agree with you that we should keep, tables separate, especially when the data is sort of mutually exclusive between those different charts. But otherwise, it may not always be easy that way. Otherwise, you do the flat table approach, right? Everything in one table and then pull it in from there. But yeah, there are different considerations. There's no one approach that fits all situations. Also agree with you on the KPI charts. Yes, it should go at the top. Usually top to bottom, left to right is how people consume data. That's usually how it is done. If you look at a newspaper, you always see the main headlines or the main items at the top, and then top to bottom, left to right is sort of the process they follow as well, for a reason, right? And the other reason I bring up newspapers is, and it's a good example. Even before a lot of businesses started using data visualization, you have seen data visualization being used in newspapers. If you haven't noticed that, just look at newspapers from 5 years back, like literally 5 to 10 years back, you would see examples where data visualizations are used, right? Just to paint that picture clearly and get readers' attention with all the colors and whatever. A few other thoughts on which charts to use to address Manthan's question. I think most use cases can be solved with some of the simplest charts out there, which are easier to read. There are charts that will need an instruction manual for how to read. We don't need those charts in most of the situations, right? There are fancy charts like Sankey diagrams, the petal charts. These are some of the fancier charts people use in like visualization competitions and stuff. It looks nice. Is it always very easily readable? Depends on how well you have put it together, but in most cases, people would understand the line charts or the bar charts or the pie charts, right? Now, it's not just a matter of which chart type you chose. There's also additional factors such as best practices for each type of chart, right? One of the considerations for using a line chart would be, if there's time series, if you are plotting time on one of the axes, you would use a line chart. KPIs, you could use some of the KPI charts or the cells, like Lakshit mentioned. You could do additional things there, like, add some greens and some reds for whether the KPIs are within the limits, within the thresholds. You can compare it against last year by adding a small percentage. You can optionally add a trend line right below that KPI just to see if it has increased or decreased from last week, right? So there are some of those things that you can do. If you ask me about a pie chart, my preferred chart is a donut chart instead of a pie chart due to a couple of reasons. One, a donut chart, if you use a
You
donut chart
remember?
instead of a pie chart. Yes, go ahead.
I was just reminding you. Do you remember the sunburst chart?
The symbols
That
chart.
the sunburst chart. It's
Oh,
like a
yeah.
donut on top of a donut on top of a donut.
Yeah, I remember that from some MBA case studies. So yeah, a donut chart, because you can also have a KPI or a sum total at the center of the pie or the donut, right? The whole, or you could put in a visual icon that represents what has been broken down there. So there's a few things you could do to be creative, and while also adding value to the dashboard. That's more important, not just be creative. One very simple thing that I would do in any pie chart is, if there is like 15 to 20 categories or anything more than 6 to 7 categories, just club all the minor categories into others, because you wouldn't need to know the percentage split of like whether it's a 2% or a 1% for the smaller category items, right? What you want to see is what is the major share of the item. So you just highlight the top 3 to 4 categories, and everything else goes into the others bucket. That's a tip to have not too many colors on a pie chart, which is one of the reasons why people hate pie charts, I think. I've had clients specifically mention, do not include pie charts in the dashboard in the email. But yeah, I think most of the use cases can be addressed with some of these simpler charts that are easier to read. You don't need to teach people how to read them.
Well, I think Lakshit and Nidal have mentioned extensively about the best practices of, how can we go ahead with data visualization in terms of using the right kind of charts. In my experience, as much as I mentioned earlier, that there are different departments, particularly who are the BI team, but there are all sometimes visualization becomes optional, especially where budgets are concerned, right, for clients. So let me give you a quick example. If you're already working on a demand forecasting project and you're obviously forecasting what would be the demand, right, for a particular product, would you want visualization? You may, or you may not. So in my experience, sometimes clients don't really want to invest that kind of money and that they would rather have it built in-house. Correct? On the other hand, that's like my point one. My point two is in terms of implementation. By implementation, I mean that actually working on data visualization. So, Lakshit, you mentioned about wireframes and all. I'm completely aligned to what you mentioned. Uh, Brainstorming with the client in terms of the use case that you're solving, what would be the right KPIs. In my experience, we had to do that job first and then go and present it to the client. Now, that becomes easy when you have some sort of background or some sort of context. Example, let's say we've been building a demand forecasting model and that I have spoken to the client's analytics division and the business team who are demand planners. They are not necessarily data savvy, but they do have a good decent amount of knowledge, but they wouldn't write SQL queries, right? That's not their job. So once you have experience working with both these departments from the client side, it is easier for you to understand what their pain points is and then come up with the right KPIs, which would be then utilized into your data visualization. So the client might already have a Tableau dashboard presented. How can you do better? There are also situations like this could be the third thing, third point that I'm trying to make, that they already have a dashboard. How can you make it better? So what is very important here is that you have some strong domain knowledge. You have a very good relationship with your client, so that you're able to discuss and brainstorm with them what exactly is the pain point, what is it that they're looking at, probably by doing that yourself first and then validating it with them, so it just expedites your process. So these are the things that I think has been happening in my experience, but I'm happy to hear from you all.
I'll take a few examples of what has amazed me as far as visualization is concerned, right? I started on a note that the process is kind of very tedious, right? And why do we have to go through so much pain of getting to the end output? Of course, the end output is needed, right? I'll let's take a sports dashboard, right? Cricket is the sport that all of us know closely, so we'll take that example, but it can literally be translated to any other sport. If you look at the little bar that appears on a cricket screen, right, at the bottom, it has at least 14, at least 14 distinct data points available in that one little bar. When those 14 points are displayed there, is it clear enough that anybody who comes there, who is looking at the screen, is able to get their own information in a split of a second? Yes. Does it still equally does the job of visualizing things correctly? Yes. Does it still show all the information that is needed? Yes. Does it get the viewer attention in terms of colors, in terms of flag representations and whatnot? Yes. I think that is one of the closest example that I have in terms of what a beautiful looking dashboard is, despite so many data points. The place where I would ideally want to translate this to would be in the corporate world where we are at, right? If I were to underscore our dialogue, that's where it is at. If we are able to, like, of course we have more data points than we can and should visualize at any point of time, right? There are like 150 matrix. How many of them would you visualize and how many teams will you cater to? So then you go about building different dashboards for different teams and whatnot. But more often than not, my experience, personal experience, and this could be maybe not applicable largely, has been that a dashboard is way too busy than it should be to convey one single piece of information from one area. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be 50 data points. There should be. Why not? Because 50 different people are consuming it. But is one area fully giving me the information that I want, like a cricket dashboard does, is the question. And in most cases, I've not seen that happening. There is just way too much data, and I have to stare at the screen for at least 15 minutes to even understand what is happening in there. The other aspect is, do you get insights out of the dashboard that you have built, or is that dashboard in itself insight, right? So are you visualizing your insights, or is your visualizing leading to getting insights? That is also a component where most of the things are, like, the ball drops there in my understanding, right? A lot of time you'll just end up visualizing a lot of things and then leave it to stakeholders to get insights from, right? And then we are coming slowly and gradually, the dashboards go um, to mature itself to a level where insights are there on the dashboard, right? Insights not in terms of text, in terms of visualization itself, but the graphs that are there are not showing data, are now showing the output that is needed. That's one. The other thing, on where I see it going, right? I see it going to a place where if I were to summarize this Zoom meeting, as an example, in a dashboard, it should happen from voice to text. That is the way it should happen. If I were to summarize this Zoom meeting as an example, in a dashboard, it should happen from voice to text. That is the way it should happen. If I were to summarize this Zoom meeting as an example, in a dashboard, it should happen to dashboard in almost real time. I know I'm pressing technology way too much here, but that's where I see it going. That's where I think we will reach one day, where your dialogue is taken, it is analyzed by a beautiful AI system, and then you have a dashboard right there which says that, yeah, this guy spoke this much minutes, this was the highest words that he used, or this was the intonation, this is what the pitch was, this is where the negative sentiment was. A dashboard like that could be built right out of the voice, and it's not like it is not happening, it is happening in bits and parts in some shape and form. So it's only a matter of time as we get there. That's my kind of final word on this. I'm happy to hear what you all have to say, if there's anything else.
I would like to let you know that there are solutions or platforms out there which will, plug into real-time conversations and give you a live sentiment analysis. Like, for example, if you are getting on a call with with a consumer, and if the point of doing that is to understand what's their NPS score or their feedback, you can do a sentiment analysis, and from their comments, you can, there are systems that can. And that's one area where AI is being used a lot to generate those sort of insights or summarizations from data, right? You have one example I'd like to use is how Google Analytics 4 does it with the automated insights that are generated from the data that is already collected, and it's presented to you in the insights format. And that's where the AI and ML capabilities are used, so that you do not have to spend extra time trying to figure out those insights, because insight generation can be very, very painful. When I was leading data visualization teams, this is one thing that I'll always mention to team members: try to spend some more time, not just pulling the data together, not just in drafting the email with a summary, but also trying to delve into that data a bit deeper. Try to slice and dice with some dimensions just to understand where the spikes or the dips came from, and then presenting that information, because that is what really matters, because you are already spending time putting all of that together. And the reason you are doing that is because the end stakeholder does not have the time to do that. So what makes you think that if you send the summary in an email, they will have the time to delve deeper into it and uncover insights that will actually make a difference? So that's where everyone as a data analyst should spend some more time analyzing and generating insights, or use AI for that, right? These days it's much easier. We can save time and maybe focus on something else.
Thanks, Adal. Thanks for summarizing that. If I were to summarize what Manthan said, and what the general consensus in the room is what's the next step of data visualization? Like we've spoken about data visualization, but how do we action upon it? So if I break it down into a few parts, let me break it down into 5 parts for you, and let's see how we can summarize that. To order to take some real-time actions, we need real-time data availability. Correct? Which means if we break it down into 5 parts, it will be something like data availability, data refresh, visualization, insights, and action. Action is taken by the stakeholder or a decision maker. Insights are generally managed by the data analyst or the person informing the decision maker. The visualization is done on the platform. Platform could be BI, any BI tool, advanced BI tool, something that can also use an NLP language. There are, by the way, NLP tools that are now using natural language processing for deriving insights even in real time. Then you have data frequency that's generally managed by ETL team members who take the data from certain tables, process it into a consumable format, and then feed that into the platform for the visualization platform. And then comes the data availability itself, the sources of data, which need to collect data in real time. In order to make real time decisions, we need data to be streaming in real time as well. Those capabilities are very rare. Whether we take the data from only online systems, are there any offline systems involved? Do we use APIs? Do we use connectors? Do we use tags on the website? How do we make data available in real time? Once that big question is answered, the rest of the pipeline can be managed. There are different stakeholders to manage each of these pipelines, but can be done, and actions can also be taken. Second thing I want to highlight is there's the data visualization and action are two very different things. In a sense, while data visualization is done on a platform, It also generally requires an alert mechanism. For example, you're doing a sentiment analysis, and suddenly you see, due to any new ad that you release or any new marketing campaign that you released, the sentiment score for your brand has suddenly dropped by some 10%. You would want to be alerted about that in real time. So there are various social media platforms that also give you an out of the box sentiment analysis. So for example, if you're advertising on Twitter, Google, or any such platforms, they would be able to give you sentiment analysis in real time. You can feed them into your systems and create an alert mechanism out of it. So those alert mechanisms are also getting created. Uh, having said that, the key question is, how do we action it in real time? The action, now whether that action has to be done manually or automated is a different ball game altogether. So now we're delving or getting into a space where we're automating or automating the decision making process itself. For example, if my sentiment dropped by say 10%, 20%, or whatever percent, can there be an automated or an AI system that can go back, update my marketing campaign, maybe play around with the keywords, the bid budget, pause it if that's the action, let's say, to be taken, immediately pause the campaign, and then alert the further stakeholders that hey, this happened, this is what happened, this is the reason why we stopped your campaign. Next example could be you have a seasonal sale coming up. Suddenly your inventories are about to get depleted. Can your alert system immediately feed this data in real time, alert you that your inventory is less than 10%, replenish it, or make an order to the nearest supplier, ask them to replenish the inventory in real time? And all of this, it's a supply chain question, can be done in an automated fashion. So automated decisioning is what will be is the next step towards the narrative of data visualization, because that visualization should also then tell you what the action was taken on the basis of it. So over to you,
Yes,
Suman, for some
and I
of those
think there should
insights.
be a right. I think there should also be a data visualization tools which tells you to stop at the right time. I'm just kidding, Lakshit. We are good, but I'm sure, like in all honesty, that is the use case that is needed, right? If there was a dashboard which told me that hey, you have taken like 5 minutes already into this conversation, if that bar graph kept going up, that is essentially the use case, the core use case of where we would want to see it going. We will take someone's comment on the next recording. We will let her start that because we've not given her a chance on this one. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you all next.